You might catch yourself sliding in and out of it. You might catch yourself sliding in and out of a hallucinatory state. Just relax and enjoy it. Just relax and enjoy it.
This is an experiment in mind formation. Information. Forming, controlling, operating your mind and your brain. Using digital techniques to overload, scramble, confuse, unfocus your mind. The natural state of the brain is chaos. Chaos is beautiful.
Daniel Ingram and Gary Sanders, what's up, y'all?
Great to be here. Hello. Hey,
Hello.
Good to see you.
So I wanted to talk to both of you because I respect both of your opinions as people who have been in this practice for a while, who really kind of know the ins and outs of the practice. And the topic that I kind of wanted to talk about, it's kind of a hot button kind of a topic. And I've noticed that, and this is just from my own experience, that spiritual communities, Buddhist communities in particular, have let politics inform their Dharma rather than letting their Dharma inform their politics, if that makes sense. It's been drawn to my attention that there's a lot of places teaching things that aren't really in line with the process of awakening, right? It's basically like attaching the woke ideology to the Buddhist practice, which is kind of antithetical to what the Buddha was teaching about identity, right?
Well, that's a very, very complicated topic. And just to be like, I'm not sure there was ever a time when politics wasn't involved in Buddhism. So getting the Sangha got patronage from various kings and rulers and princes and wealthy merchants, and people almost certainly involved some sort of politics or the tacit approval of said ruler, who may not have been always the nicest of people or something. So I think even from back in the day, as at least I read the suttas, I find all kinds of politics. And certainly by the time we get to Ashoka, there was all kinds of political. And then like the endless wars in Cambodia, like at Angkor Wat, where they were like the Hindus and the Buddhists were going back and forth and knocking the noses off all of the statues of the other, thing. And if you look in Tibetan Buddhism, right, the wars for whose emptiness was the emptier emptiness, so that a patron would support them, or wars for slaves or whatever they were doing. So I'm just to sort of normalize the intersection of Buddhism and politics. I think this is endemic and original. What are your thoughts, Gary?
I would have to agree. Yeah, I mean, it might look a little different, but the underlying thing is it's same, right? That people get in the way of the practice.
Yeah, and then you could find videos online of Buddhist monks blessing the troops that are going to go kill the Rohingya and stuff, and Burma, or Zen being used to train kamikaze pilots in World War II. Like this is, regardless of anything about what's going on in contemporary stuff, I don't think this is anything particularly new. And then in terms of woke ideology specifically, like this is a really complicated thing, and it kind of depends on, do you mean the sort of like straw man like characterization of woke politics that sometimes gets kind of exaggerated and distorted, that is used by the right to demonize woke politics? Or do you mean cancel culture? Or do you mean like, there's a lot of different ways to even think about what in the world woke politics is. And I would be interested in how you're defining it, because there's lots of ways to think about it.
Right. There are many different ways to define it and many different facets to it. Right. It's a thing with many sides. And my only real point is that the identity politics in particular, the use of pronouns, this, that, and the other labels and things of this nature are kind of antithetical to shedding identity. So like by attaching value to these pronouns, to this identity, you're basically, it's my opinion that people are just adding more layers to have to ultimately shed in the process of awakening. And it's, no big deal, like if that's what you want to, whatever you want to call yourself is fine with me. I don't give a shit, like I really don't, how it doesn't affect me. But it is also antithetical to this process, in my opinion. Any
You
thoughts?
want to take a stab at this, Gary?
Yeah, the pronoun part specifically, I could just feel my body feeling uncomfortable as that got mentioned. And I hear where you're coming from, Justin. But like, the pronoun thing specifically, shit changes. Ideas change and culture changes. And I know you can claim whatever pronoun feels authentic to you,
right?
Still be still practice and
For sure.
follow this path, and wake up from suffering.
Yeah. No, I mean,
And
I'm not discounting that by any means, and I'm not saying that it's inherently a bad thing. Like I said, I don't honestly care what people do. It's just, it feels to me like adding more layers of identity is just ultimately going to be a hindrance in this process. And that's it. I mean, like, there's no judgment on my part at all, but that's just the way it appears to me.
I totally understand why you might feel that way, and I get that. I myself could barely remember people's names, much less their pronouns. That is perhaps because I didn't grow up thinking about it in the same kind of a way. And it's also one of the more embarrassing deficits of my brain, is the inability to remember both people's names and people's pronouns if they have ones that are different from what my read of the person would naturally expect. So but that is not necessarily my own neural deficiencies, and quirks are not necessarily any reason to condemn a movement or a practice of politeness or respect. And even in the time of the Buddha, we found all kinds of rituals of respect, of very specific things you might say or not say, of orders you said them in, of terms you called people, so each culture and time and place and sub-community has its particular codes of conduct, its particular linguistics that demonstrate being in that group or in that community. Even in monastic contexts, for example, there are very specific ways you do things, very specific places you stand, or ways you greet people, or what you do with your hands, or, so the rituals of a culture and the rituals of politeness and the rituals of respect do change and evolve, and that can be jarring. I understand that as well. I also totally understand the logic of people wanting to be called what feels most comfortable to them, not only in terms of their name, but also in terms of these are just my thoughts on it. And like, I've been in monastic contexts where I had to learn all this additional etiquette. I had to learn how to chant. I had to learn how to say things in Pali. I had to learn how to do various things like that, who stood where and who sat where and who went first, and what all the etiquette of how you handle things, and and it feels incredibly awkward until you start to sort of get used to it. And so I get both sides of it.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense to me, and that actually provides a lot of context. Again, this is just something that had just been knocking around in my brain for the past couple of weeks, and I was like, oh, that's a topic I would like to explore with people who know more about the history than me and who have been involved with this practice more than me. So, that's why I kind of wanted to weigh in with you, and I really appreciate the perspective, and that is a good point. I hadn't looked at it from that angle, but I mean, I feel like kindness is just kind of engendered within the practice anyway, and we don't need someone to tell us, not to say the thing, That's my opinion.
And again, like, what may or may not be offensive in one context might be totally offensive in another, and that there's nothing new about that within humanity.
Exactly.
Right? So
there's nothing new about that with linguistics in general, and you can never really tell when you're going to offend someone. But that's whose burden is that to carry at the end of the day? I mean, we can navigate the world as skillfully as possible, but we're still going to be making mistakes in the eyes of somebody.
That is for certain.
Yeah, I love that point, Daniel. As this relates to, or how similar it is to monastic and lay persons dealing with each other, and it is so different, even within like a tradition, different lineages and different centers, even in communities and that kind of thing. And you know, I just keep thinking about, and I think, Justin, I may have mentioned this to you before. My first good mindfulness teacher, Dr. Faye Schneider, she used to really kind of drill in our heads about practicing when in Rome, do as Romans do.
Mm.
And that's been a really good practice for me to get over myself, you know, and you know, and through the years, you know, and starting to recognize, you know, where some of my biases and my conditioning and that kind of stuff falls into play. And then, like, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm in this place and people do things a certain way. And oh, and Daniel, how about honoring the monastic system wherever you're at, and having to see the patriarchy come up.
Oh, right. Yeah,
And just
exactly.
like,
It's a
oh
thing,
man, oh.
right? Get to see the nuns treated poorly and not getting to be full, you know, bikinis, or having to wear white where
Yeah.
you know, and they walk behind where you know, those are all things that can definitely, you know, create sensations of
Yeah.
and patterns of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how could it not, right? That's definitely going to bring some stuff up, even if you didn't know it was there or not. No, those are all really good points. And again, I wanted to have this conversation to just not provide only perspective for myself, but for, you know, anybody who might actually listen to this, because it is a complicated topic, and it's like, how do we adapt and how do we move forward with this? And I guess, you know, like Gary said, I guess when in Rome, we do as the Romans do. As far as I could tell, right? What else can we do?
Yeah, and then I think it gets a little bit complicated when you're in a society where it is not clear if you're in Rome or not, or who the Romans are.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's where it becomes more complicated. If you're in a monastic context and a monk is wearing a robe, you know there's a certain way you need to treat them. Whereas if you're in a culture where some people are expecting, you know, high degree of pronoun sensitivity and some people are not, and you don't always quite know, and you may have forgotten to ask or been in a context where nobody was asking and it would be weird to ask, and then suddenly you find yourself in somewhere where it's rude not to ask
Right.
and not to remember. Like, but the problem is those are not marked in the same easy way as like with robes and shaved heads and you know, all of that is, you know what, at least if you know who you're supposed to do what with, not that you can necessarily remember all the things you're supposed to do, but now it's hard to tell who the you know. And so yeah, that's where it can also get complicated, because this is really in-group out-group signaling, right? And some people, if you asked about the pronouns, you're in the out-group, right? Just because you asked, you're one of them. And then some people, if you don't, oh, you're in the out group, you're one of them. And that can feel really hard and be frustrating and feel unfair, and it's tricky to navigate.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's just, again, this is just a topic that's kind of been on my mind for a little while. And you know, I do have some skin in the game with it. I was recently excommunicated from a particular meditation center for a way that I taught not self. But, you know, and again, here we are. It is what it is. I had also been previously discriminated against for being a cisgendered white male. I was not afforded the same opportunities as other people, and was told that directly to my face. And so, you know, it just kind of made me, you know, brought up some feels.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just been a topic that's, and again, you know, like I come from a place of love and acceptance and compassion for everyone, and I want everyone to wake up, and I want everyone to do, I want everyone to thrive, and, you know, live in a state of eudaimonia and be the best version of whatever they are that they can be. But I also, you know, again, the only real topic the only real point that I was trying to make, rather, is that just adding more layers of identity is just, it's going to be a hindrance, at least in my perspective, right? And again, that's not any of my business what anyone does, and I wish everyone the best in everything that they do. You know, I have trans friends, I have gay friends, I have friends of all colors and denominations, and I want everyone to do the best that they can. But it's just been my experience that, like, my identity has been the thing that has caused me the most suffering in my life. Is trying to be somebody, you know, trying to be whatever the thing is, that bhavatana, that, you know, craving for becoming whatever. So, that's where I'm at. Any thoughts?
I'm sorry that you have been
Yeah.
excommunicated and excluded and othered and all of that. And I think it also kind of points to what we've been talking about, that, that things have changed so much within the Western Dharma community. And I don't know if it's more specific US or like bigger North America, but yeah, the old school teachers, with their conditioning, and they've been doing things a certain way, and then all this new layperson community coming in with different ideas of politics and gender and all that kind of thing, and that clash that's happened, and uh, and I've been in those communities when I've seen that, and I've been kind of in the middle, like I'm old enough to not be one of the kids anymore, but I'm not old enough to be one of the old hippies that are still the leading teachers in these centers. So, it is very interesting times, and and just the being discriminated for being a cis white male. I don't know how many times I've seen that, and I've heard that, and I suppose I've probably been, I think I've probably experienced that, but then I've also, at the same time, I've been the recipient of my privilege way more than I've been hindered by
Oh,
the
for
fact
sure.
that I'm not in a marginalized, segment of people.
Oh yeah, no,
So,
for sure.
I think this is what we're practicing for. I know this is what I'm practicing for. Stuff
Absolutely.
changes all the time, and stuff's really difficult. And like all of a sudden, I'm in the midst of this, more in the recovery world, but I've been part of this recovery community for the last few years, and I just all of a sudden I just don't feel like I'm any part of it anymore. Like, I know I can still do good there, but like I don't really want to continue with it, and yeah, and I'm making some moves to, I'm not getting kicked out, but I'm kicking myself out and placing my attention other places. And so, I hope you can find a new home and a new. I mean, I know you have your own sangha.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then again, I would like to just say that this isn't like a boo-hoo, woe is me kind of a thing. It's just this is what happened, right? These are the deets of the story, right? Like, I mean, I wish them all the best, and I love all of them very dearly, and they have their mission, whatever their mission is, and I have mine, and it is what it is, man, and they're cool, and in my book, I love them, as I said, very much. But again, it's just these are the details of what happened, and I can also relate exactly with what you said. It's like, yeah, I've experienced that discrimination, but on the other side, I've also experienced a lot of privilege on my part, also a lot of suffering, but whatever. That's why we're here, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And all that said, it still sucks.
It does suck, right? At the end of the day, it still sucks. But and the thing about it is, I thought I gave the talk as skillfully as possible. But again, how do we know, depending on who's in the room, like how it's going to be received? Like I can be as careful and as measured with my words as possible, and try to deliver it as skillfully as possible. But at the end of the day, I can't, you know, tell somebody how to receive it.
That's one of my hard lessons in the last probably 3 to 5 years: impact versus intention.
Right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, miscommunication and misunderstanding. And also that, sometimes in these lessons, there really is something for us to learn and grow from, even if it is painful to be rejected, to be othered, to be shut out. Sometimes it is very good to learn and grow from those things and go, oh, and I've had tons of those experiences myself
Right.
over the years, right? And other times we go, wow, I hope they learned something from this, and maybe everybody can grow in the process, and eventually reflect on how they may be helping or harming. And the other thing is there's no perfect thing, so everything helps and harms to some degree, right? So like, and one person's treasure is another person's poison, and and language can be so divisive in that particular way, where a certain word may be so endearing to one person and so off-putting to another, or a certain concept or a certain social convention. Yeah, there are landmines like this that are sometimes very hard to detect.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And you know, the thing that really I think hurt me the most is they broke up with me over a text message.
Oh,
Yeah, that one got me. I was like,
it's the
really?
modern era, though, isn't it?
Over text, over text. Like, damn, just twist the knife a little harder.
Mm.
Yeah, but like again, it is what it is. But yeah, and at the end of the day, you know, as Gary said, it still sucks. It is, but what can we do, right? Here we are. This is how it is. Right now, it's like this, and like, I don't even know where to go from there. I don't know how we can expand on this topic anymore. Really, it's been a
Mm.
really short conversation, but
You
Well,
know,
actually, the Buddhist world, if you look at, obviously, I'm something of a controversial figure, right? So, like, to put it gently, in the Buddhist world, right? People have called my book infamous, called me a renegade or an iconoclast or something, and I've
a
certainly managed
heretic.
to a heretic, definitely, yes, a heretic, deluded, hallucinating narcissist, and it's interesting. Actually, there were just letters to the editors of some neuroscience papers we published on cessation, and so we did good neuroscience, and they were like, well, so and so says you don't have any insights, so basically there's no way you're having cessation, so your neuroscience papers that you did with Harvard are therefore invalid, right? And obviously that's a complicated conversation, but it leads to the broader point of two things. One is something called the narcissism of small differences. So even if with these people who are criticizing me, I might agree with 95% of the Dharma, the 5% or 3% we disagree on might feel like a grain of sand in their eye, and that's been commonly noted across all religious traditions. So even if with these people who excommunicated you or shut you out, you might actually agree on a tremendous number of things.
yeah,
Sometimes they can be single issue voters in terms of what the sins, that the lines thou shalt not cross, the things thou shalt not say, the sacred cows thou shalt not do whatever to, and turn into hamburger, whatever you would be the very offensive thing to do with them. And so and that's just the way it's going to be. The eight winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, and fame and ill repute blow him personally as always. And even the Buddha had to deal with substantial detractors and critics and wars within the Sangha, and the Sangha split, and there are people who give power plays, and so that is also original. That is authentic to the earliest forms of Buddhism, to have those sorts of controversies and conflicts, and people saying, you should not have said this, you should have said that, this is the wrong thing to say. You can find those words very often in the text. You should have said this first, and what you said first, you should have said last, and
right.
this is not the right, doctrine or way of speaking. That's all through the Pali Canon as well, and in the debates that the Buddha and other followers had with critics and stuff. So
It's just patterns repeating. Same old, same old.
human endeavors.
Yeah, yeah.
And Daniel, I'm glad that you brought up because I was kind of thinking about that just your place in the Buddhist world, and it has been controversial, which I appreciate. I greatly appreciate it. I love that.
There's pros and cons to that. Like it's a mixed blessing. It's part treasure, part poison, right? So
well, but and isn't that what makes it more beautiful, though? I am not attracted to the person that talks with a fake spiritual voice and says a whole bunch but doesn't really say anything,
The NPR voice.
and I just have to say, you are such a good model of, like, following your heart, offering what you've learned, and taking the good and the bad with all of it, and then still going. Still, you're still showing up, you're still offering your teachings, you're still, offering more books and revisions and helping others, and you're not letting the bastards get you down. And so thank you.
Yeah, second.
Well, it's kind of you. Admittedly, there is some part of me that sort of enjoys the sparring and the controversy in the same way that people might like stepping into a boxing ring, right? So that is a quirk of my personality, for better or for worse, part of my karma and unfolding conditioning. So that is, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Obviously, people have mixed opinions about that. But it's funny, though, most of my time I spend thinking about much bigger projects like the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium and like what people from diverse traditions and diverse opinions can do to help upgrade the clinical mainstream and its relationship to these deep end experiences and transformations. Because speaking of otherness, like there couldn't be a stronger sense of otherness than most of the textbooks of psychiatry, the DSM-5 TR and stuff would say that most of the experiences that we consider normal and important and transformative of our lives were mental illness, should be pathologized, were psychosis, were delusional, were mania, were bipolar, were whatever, complicated things. And that's, nearly all of my friend circle is highly diagnosable, by that DSM criteria, and yet they happen to be neuroscientists at top universities and psychiatrists and lawyers and people who help with the charity and fine contributing citizens. And yet and so the global problem that regardless of our little sect squabbling with each other, we have the mainstream clinical world that does not relate skillfully to the deep end that we care about and experience and as part of our daily lives. And so that sort of otherness and discrimination, I have lots of friends who they made the mistake of telling a psychologist or a psychiatrist whatever happened to them on their insight retreat or from their psychedelic, and they got diagnosed with something who said, you're broken for life, you'll be on meds for life. This is, when what happened to them ended up being a very transformatively beneficial process and was not did not deserve a pathological diagnosis. So it's that bigger thing. And I think that it's been commonly noted in politics, like why does the left eat itself again and again and again, right? Like why does it divide so quickly? And why did the super in-group politics of who's in and who's out? No, you said something slightly wrong, and so you're not in the group anymore. That's actually, this has been studied, and that is actually a symptom of a powerlessness against a much bigger, broader threat, but with no sense of how you change the bigger system or the bigger dynamic or the bigger cultural thing in place. Groups tend to resort to infighting as a sort of a neurotic way to express their power and to demonstrate that they are okay. And they have purity testing and like who are the true people, and you get this Republican side too, rhinos, Republicans in name only, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's common in movements in general, and you also see this in religious traditions. And so we shouldn't be surprised when this happens, but because it's hard to figure out how to take on the big things, the big cultural things.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And it's actually funny you mentioned that with your work with the Emergent Phenomenological Research Consortium. It's because I had a big shift at the beginning of July. Big shift, and since then I've been great, feel better than I ever have.
Nice.
I'm wonderful. But I have certain friends around me who are very sure that I have psychosis, which I know I don't. Other people have, noted that I've been very manic lately. It's like, well, I just, yeah. So, I'm experiencing the same thing right now. It's like I had this big shift, and then now I have people, telling me that I'm crazy and manic and all these things. And it's like, yeah, maybe so, but that's not my experience, right?
Yeah. Good to know.
Yeah. But experiencing that as well, like simultaneously with the other thing that's going on. So
that sounds like a lot.
yeah. It's I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, it can be a little frustrating. If I wanted it to be frustrating, I could let it be frustrating. How about that? I could definitely let it get to me if I wanted to, but it's, what would that, at the end of the day, what would that do? How would that serve me in any way? It would be not helpful.
Yeah, and then there's the question of what to do with the sort of Buddhist ideals of equanimity, or how can the retrofitting of those lead to the sense of indifference, or just these are complicated questions of what to do with those kinds of feelings, whether or not it's beneficial to actually feel them in an equanimous way, but be honest about the feelings, or to be honest about if they are getting to you in some way, right? So this is a very complicated topic, or should they just be let go of from a sort of Buddhist idealistic point of view?
Honestly, as far as the accusations of psychosis and mania, like that doesn't really bother me at all, because I know what I'm experiencing and it doesn't feel like psychosis. I feel like if it was psychosis, I would probably be having a pretty bad time. But it's been the exact opposite of that for me. So I don't feel like it's psychosis.
But isn't that what somebody with psychosis would say, though?
Maybe.
Actually,
Probably.
yeah. So the problem with mania actually is that it's a euphoric. Most of the other mental illnesses are dysphoric to some degree, but mania is definitely an outlier in the things that people worry about. And so, unfortunately, in the exclusion criteria is not feels good, because it might feel amazing. In fact, I have a number of friends with very, very convincingly true bipolar disorder, and when they're up, they're way up and they love it. And that's often the reason they go off their meds, is because they like being way up. It just feels too good, even if it causes destruction and chaos in their lives.
Well, so far I haven't had any destruction and chaos, so
nice. Good. There you go. So, yeah. Good.
Yeah, only good things. No, but yeah, so yeah, that's just that's kind of where I was at. I just, I wanted to talk to you all about it and just see, where you guys landed on it, because it's again, it's a complicated topic, and it's one that I'm trying to navigate skillfully, and apparently, even in the midst of trying to do so, I didn't, at least according to the audience at that time. So, it's something that I really wanted to address and talk about, because it's a topic that I don't think really gets mentioned a lot. At least recently. I don't know. I mean, as you said, politics have always been involved with the Dharma, and these kinds of situations are just patterns repeating, which everything is. But how do we navigate this skillfully as facilitators and practitioners and teachers, and how do we do the best that we can in the midst of this changing political landscape?
I'm curious, Daniel, since you're here, and Justin is a teacher and leads groups, and I'm a teacher and I lead groups, and Daniel, you're you. I find you to be an amazing teacher. And by the way, I don't know how long ago it was, but you gave me some, I can't remember if it was on the Dharma Overground or if it was via email, but you gave me some tips on jhana practice that were really, really helpful. So,
well, thanks be to all the people who figured that
So,
stuff out and taught me. Thanks to Bhante Gunaratana and Lee Brasington, whose books were useful, and all the
Shayla Catherine and
Shayla Catherine and yep, all this. Yeah. Thank you to all of them, right? Because so many people have contributed to this conversation. Christina Feldman, et cetera. So
I got it, and I have to personally. I've been on the twin path, so I got to shout out Delson Armstrong and Bhante Vimalaramsi and David Johnson. But so we're all here, and very much related to this. In these, the past 5 years, 7 years or so, in leading groups. I was up in Portland for a while, and Portland is Portland, Oregon, to be specific. Portland is very woke, very extremely liberal, and in that Dharma setting, when some of the older white male teachers, and I think that was part of it, the older white male teachers are offering the teachings of the Buddha. Let's practice metta. Let's try and cultivate a boundless heart of loving kindness towards all beings, including your enemies, and et cetera, et cetera. And then getting a whole bunch of pushback from the community. How dare you ask me to send metta to my abusers, or how dare you ask me to forgive everyone of everything. That kind of these lofty ideas towards awakening. But then in this modern context, when these people of marginalized societies are not jiving with these ancient teachings, and I know I'm trying to be a lot more aware of it, and I'm trying to be more trauma informed and trying to meet people where they're at. But I'm just I'm not sure if I've heard you talk about this, Daniel.
That's so exactly what I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's kind of
go ahead.
Where I was going with this is like, how do we deal with these situations is exactly the same thing what you're talking about, Gary. Go ahead, Dan.
So I think those are all very good points, and it's funny we're all converging on this. The next thing I was going to say, Justin, is obviously the group that excluded you or excommunicated you. There's all of us have had trauma just by being born, but some certainly may have had more than others. And if they need to create a space in which they feel safe, and there are very specific linguistic or social conventions that help support that, I of course can totally understand that, and that may be a very valid part of what they're going through right now. Okay, I understand that, even as painful as it may be to be othered in that way. And like I recommend the works of trauma sensitive mindfulness and the work of Willoughby Britton, David Treleaven, that sort of stuff, actually all the time. So like I probably mentioned that book to 50 people or more per year, and sometimes it feels like 100. And so I think that is a very important thing that is being added to this and added to the mix, and an important consideration. Is it also, can I simultaneously, on the other side of that, appreciate perspectives like anti-fragile, which are saying, yes, you may have had trauma, but like, does it always pay to be extraordinarily sensitive? I don't think everybody always has an obvious choice in that from a we have choice point of view, right? So like, even if, and people are where they are, and if that's where they're dealing with and what they're going through and what they need, okay, sure. And that might be a part of their healing journey to create very, very safe, protected spaces with very particular cultures. And that said, even like that sort of might dismiss the point that we might all be more sensitive about pronouns. I still see the greater point that if someone really feels like a them, and I called them a he or a she, and that really doesn't seem to reflect their identity, for example, okay, sure. I totally see why it's important to be sensitive to that, particularly if that's some kind of issue for them, or maybe even just as standard politeness. I get the broader point, even if I'm relatively bad at it.
Right. Yeah. And again, I can see all sides of it, which is what makes it such a complicated, complicated topic for us to even try to comprehend at this point. It's like, it's just walking on eggshells all the time. And again, I can deliver things as skillfully as possible, in my own view, but I can't influence people on how they're going to receive it, depending on where they're at, due to things like trauma or whatever else, whatever other causes and conditions, brought them to where they're at this point.
Right. And then there's always the possibility that even people watching this thing will say, well, there was only one right answer. There's no room for nuanced discussion. You can't do that. And if, I certainly expect, if this is posted on YouTube or whatever, that the comments section has the potential to be pretty rich and interesting, with various opinions about whether or not this is even a discussable topic,
Right.
or if you just simply must say, this is the only way it can be. And if you can't do that, then, or don't fully agree with that, or think this is just trauma and not just a standard universal thing, then, so I think there is the potential for trouble here. And okay, there it is. But truly trying to do a good thing by everybody here, as well as we know how.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, everything is conceptual, right? Like, even, I mean, down to the most basic language, everything is conceptual. If we're really getting down, and my view is that, if we're viewing reality as it is, however we can view it in, through our own perception, is, it's what we take in through the senses, and all the words are just descriptors and concepts to help us navigate this, right?
Kind of. I realize I'm talking a lot, but like, if you have 3 trainings, right? So like, that's the wisdom training point of view. The third training point of view, this is all just sensations arising and vanishing, meanings arise and vanish, purely dependent on conditions with no self in them. Okay, that's a wisdom teaching, right? But a lot of people are not necessarily at the place where wisdom teachings might land with them, resonate with them in that particular form or articulation. And so you also have people who very much what's going on with them is like first training stuff. So the first training, morality, assumes beings, assumes identity, assumes roles, assumes work, assumes speech is important, assumes actions are important, right speech, right action, right livelihood. It assumes karma, it assumes a past and a future and an identity, it assumes social conventions, it assumes skillful psychology, it assumes all of those things. And so I think what a lot of confusion arises is when you're talking at a third training point of view, a very sort of, wisdom, insight, vipassana point of view, and someone else is looking at that and interpreting it through a very first training lens of social identity, of social role, of social politeness, of social convention, which in a first training point of view are everything. They're like the whole point. And so I think this kind of general confusion of relative versus sort of ultimate, if you will forgive the word, teachings, and people seeing the one through this lens or the one through that lens, and that's where a tremendous amount of confusion is continually taking place. And it's very hard to guard against unless you sort of meta frame it in that kind of context.
Right. No, that's excellent. That's actually spot on, man. I couldn't have put that better myself. And that's exactly what it is. It's like we're talking about third training to people who are still in the first, and that does I obviously would create a lot of confusion, right? When you're talking about everything is conceptual, they're like, "What the fuck are you even talking about right now?" Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think about that, Gary?
I think a lot about what Matt Flickstein told me some years ago. I worked with him for about a year. A Vipassana guy, he was Bhante G's right-hand man who, now he's way more into, non-dualism, which, and I may have told you this before, Justin, like, a big part of my practice is, I like to push myself outside my comfort zones, and at the time I was around, I think I had just moved to Portland, and I was renting, not the community I was in, but I was around a lot of like airy-fairy, what I saw as airy-fairy non-dual teachings and presentations. And I really was kind of dismissing it at the time. And then I had this opportunity to go to work with Matt, and I was like, yeah, what the hell? Let me do it. And one of the things that Matt said that really rang my bell was, just the idea that, the non-dual idea that, there's nothing static, nothing solid. There's no absolute, me or mine. And we need to act as if. So
Right.
just that whole idea of like, to not fall into nihilism,
Right.
to still do the right thing that's in front of you to do,
Oh,
still
yeah.
go through things instead of just like, oh man, nothing matters. I'm not here, man.
It's for me. It's just because it's a game doesn't mean it's not important, right? At the end of the day, I mean, it's like the most important thing, and then we get into this again conversation of dichotomous thinking, this black and white fixed view lens, or we get into both and, right? And it's both and. It's like, yeah, it's all an illusion, and it's fucking important.
I just want to shout out to all those with neurospicy brains that are meditating.
I don't know if I've met like one like quote unquote normal person. It's like, yeah, no, I recently like really got into Buddhist practices. I'm sure they're out there. I don't know them personally. Of course, I also come into this practice through the recovery community initially. So
That's another aspect about this whole thing that I don't think we talk enough about, that just personally, like I came to my first Buddhist group and my first Buddhist center and my first real teacher. I came to them out of absolute desperation. I was suffering so much. I tried so many other things, and there was just this thing about Buddhism and about meditation, just kept like, there's something there. I think that's, going to help. And so, I dragged my ass into, into the group, into the center, to that teacher. And that's, most of us are, to some degree. I've joked through the years that I still have never met anybody that just like their life was just this perfect, fairy tale, and they're just like, I'm going to start meditating. I'm going to put the cherry on the ice cream sundae of life just because, things are so great. I'm just going to make it better. And apparently, I think I've heard of a couple out there, supposedly. But again, is that just a story they told themselves, But like that thing to remember, that there is so much trauma, in
Yep.
our sanghas and in our groups.
Staggering
And
amounts.
and even the people that have been practicing for a really long time, not just the newcomers, but the people that have been the teachers that are up there teaching,
Oh yeah.
still have their stuff. They got their neuroses, they got their trauma, they got their conditioning, and this is why compassion is so important.
very
Yep. Realm of samsara ruled by the demon Mara. What do we expect, right?
Oh man, I couldn't have put that better myself.
I want a marching band. Come on.
But yeah, and then so the fact that these practices and these sangos do, you know, attract people who are seeking because they are suffering, yeah, it's gigantic. And figuring out how to be kind to all beings in all moments, you know, it's one of the reasons I almost never get up on the front cushion. Right, I just don't like that role. I prefer one-on-one teaching, because I can try to figure out where someone is, what they need, how they think of the world, how they relate to it, what kind of culture and place they're coming from, and attempt to um, be sensitive to the dynamics and the social niceties and the ethics of their space, the linguistic conventions of where they're coming from. And so, like, I just, you know, I do these podcasts, which is a sort of a funny thing, right? So they are going to reach a lot of people, but it's a very weird thing to do, you know. And yeah, because who knows, you know, and if anybody out there is watching this and we've said something terrible that just is like awful to you, I'm sorry. Like, honestly, not trying to hurt anybody, you know, like, because it is tricky. And yeah.
Yeah, I would like to reiterate that point. If anything was said or did that has caused anyone harm, please accept my deepest apologies. It was not my intention. This is just an important conversation that I feel like we need to have within the Buddhist community.
You know, and I'll just say, you know, from my heart of hearts, fuck them. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I will say,
Oh no.
Yes to all of that. I just wanted to lighten the mood a little bit.
that lightened the mood as much as it made me incredibly nervous. Like, it was a very mixed reaction there.
Well,
anyway, sorry, go on. But
yes.
I understand the humor, like, but
yes to all this. And I am, and Daniel, I'm actually, I think it's interesting because I haven't really thought about this a lot, but I have been steering more and more to the smaller, you know, the more of the one-on-one, you know, and that is something that I've learned, and you know, again, in the, I don't know, the last 5-7 years, something like that. By the way, when I say again, I can't remember if we talked about it here or I just had a therapy appointment right before this. So I don't know if I was talking about that there, here. It all blends together. But yeah, I agree with everything that you guys said, and I am absolutely available to talk to anybody. If I've said anything, if I've presented anything that rubs somebody wrong, or you know, somebody totally disagrees with, I would love to talk to you about it, one-on-one. I prefer not in front of a group of 50 or 100, but I could do that too. I really, you know, I thrive on connection, and I love getting out. You know, this is how I grow. You know, hearing outside views, and you know, and you know, maybe seeing some of my blind spots, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I can't possibly agree with that anymore, man. Like, and what, same, if anybody would like to talk to me, and if I've said anything that has tickled that part of you that made you uncomfortable, I would love to have a discussion about it, and I'm reachable. So, you know, reach out. Let's talk.
And then I think when I think about like identity, it has been said many, many times that you may have to become somebody before you can become nobody. And like, not that I think that is an absolute or a certainty, but the trend I think is very true. Some degree of ego strength in the Freudian sense, some degree of the sense that they are okay in order to tear this down and be okay with that the insight vipassana third training process might benefit tremendously from the foundation of being an okay person who feels okay in their skin, okay in their culture, okay in their identity, okay in themselves, okay in their feelings, okay in their story, all of that stuff. And that can be a long journey for a lot of people, and it may involve a really complicated process that if you're somewhere else on the path and what works for you now is identity, you know, deconstruction, and that's what's feeling really good to you, those people often have a hard time talking to each other because they're in very, very different places. So it's not just confusion about the two teachings, but it may be also life places and individual needs, right? And some people are really good at doing this really before they became much of a somebody and really work on this after, right? They just want to tear it all down and, like whatever, that's fine. And then later they work on their psychological stuff. So I've seen a lot of complicated back and forths of this sort of thing, but just to recognize, and also like, someone in some ways might have gotten a good feeling about claiming their power to have power to throw somebody off a front cushion, right? And particularly younger people coming up, that is part of their journey of becoming people in the world who have power, right? They test boundaries, they push things, they exert what power they can, and they explore and experiment with that. And it may not feel like exploration, experimentation to them. That might feel condescending to them. No, of course, I was writing in social injustice, and how dare you say I'm just a young person experimenting with my power? That's not what I meant. But the general fact of it is also a valid and acceptable thing for younger people or even older people who are wanting to reclaim the power sometime to flex it and to get to learn what that feels like and to get to figure out the consequences of that and what they gain and what they lose when you take whatever power they have and use it in various ways. That's part of all of our growth process, me as well. And so just recognizing that that's part of human dynamics, that sort of push pull as we set boundaries, as we exert our influence and feel and learn and grow from that. And that might be part of their journey of what that was going on with them when they threw you out. Not that I'm just saying it's all fine. I'm just saying that,
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. Hey, thank you guys. I really appreciate you all both taking the time to have this conversation. And again, difficult fucking topic. And if my big takeaway is if you're going to be on the big cushion up front, keep it to the first two trainings.
If you're going to talk about the third training, just frame it very, very clearly as that and say, hey, this is a very specialized, because no self and no identity and no that it's a very confusing thing. Yeah. And I see so many people do all these weird, it gets very odd, right? Like it's a very complicated thing. Right. So yeah.
Good that's point. A whole cover. I prefer not self over no self, but that's a whole conversation there.
Anyway, yeah.
Y'all got anything you wanna mention, want to talk about, and where people can find you, what you got going on, anything like that? Either of you?
I'm online.
Interactivebuddha.com or integratedDaniel.info is my website. My personal stuff these days, and you can find a bunch of stuff there if you find it useful. And
cool. Thanks, Daniel.
I'm still going Boundless Heart Dharma, on the socials and boundlessheartdharma.com, that kind of, yeah.
Cool. But again, thank you all both so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. Again, I love and respect both of you very much, and I couldn't think of two better people to really talk about this with. So yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'm sure I'll talk to you both soon.
You too. Yeah. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.